The chamber where regalia were kept was neither lofty nor ornate. It lay under the southern tower of Citadel Iscan, its granite ribs balding with age, its air salted by the distant river. Torches hissed in sconces, and under their uneven glow sat a single object upon a cedar pedestal, a circlet of dull bronze, wrought into thorns so sharp that light itself seemed to catch and bleed on their tips. Everyone in Rhydea simply called it the crown. Foreigners who had heard of it preferred longer names: the Thorn of Kings, the Diadem of Woe, the Merciless Laurel. But within the borders of the realm, no one needed fancy epithets. They had lived for centuries with its effects and did not care to dress the thing in poetry. At sunrise on the first morning of every reign, the crown fastened itself to the temples of the sovereign prince or princess, king or queen, regent or conqueror. And from that instant the ruler awakened each dawn to the full edge of pain borne by their subjects. Bruised flesh, broken hearts, infected wounds, bereavements, hunger, humiliation. Panic each injury announced itself, searing through veins and marrow until the sovereign could scarcely breathe. And then, as the sun completed its climb, the assault relented, shrinking back into an ache behind the eyes, a reminder for the remaining hours of daylight that tomorrow would bring the reckoning again. It was why Rhydea's past kings seldom grew old, and why its queens, for all that they were famed for gentleness, snapped into fury if you startled them before sunrise. It was why ministers did not dare bring palace intrigues when dawn's light lay on the threshold. They waited until noon, when the monarch could think without convulsing from a beggar's cough 100 leagues away. The chroniclers told conflicting origin myths, but the most credible said a hermitsmith named Valen forged the crown after watching a tyrant ignore a famine. "You cannot neglect pain if it is set upon your own brow," he had proclaimed. Whether out of vengeance or hope, he hammered winter bronze, quenched it in the river mixed with blood, and shaped the thorns with his tears until the metal remembered what sorrow felt like. The legend claimed the tyrant died after 3 dawns, but the crown outlived him, and every inheritor after signed an unspoken covenant with those silent barbs. So much for histories. The present belonged to Queen Leora Velerin, 21. Whipped in, with a mathematician's curt voice. 3 weeks had passed since her father's funeral pyre had guttered into wind, and already her counsellors timed their conversations around the colour of the sunrise. Some wondered, in hushed corners, whether one so young could bear it. Others whispered that youth might be her advantage. A mind still malleable could bend to the necessity of compassion. Leora herself never voiced fear, but her lady-in-waiting, a veteran soldier named Captain Oris, saw how the Queen's fingers trembled each evening when the servants laid out the nightclothes. "In sleep one may dream of respite," Oris murmured once, closing the shutters. "Begin at dawn, Majesty. Don't begin at dawn and dread it before night even falls." The advisers, though kindly meant, did nothing to soften the first blow. On Leora's inaugural sunrise, as coppery light seeped into her bedchamber, the crown stirred from its carved box as if by the wind of some invisible oath. It lifted, spun, and pressed itself to her brow. The points sank. Not blood deep, only a pin's breadth, but enough to acquire the covenant. A roar of sensation crashed over her. A mason in the east whose lungs burned with limestone dust. A fisher child on the northwest coast whose leg had rotted from a cut while crabs nibbled the wound. An old monk enduring the limp ache of unspoken guilt. A grieving father. An abused apprentice. A midwife nursing grief that no tincture could numb, each agony. An arrow, each sorrow a knife point. By the time the sun cleared the horizon, the Queen lay on her knees, gasping like a woman clawed from drowning. Oris tried to steady her, but Leora's palm shot up. "Don't call physicians," she rasped. "No salves, no draughts. They would not dull every pain in Rhydea, so they must not dull mine." Before that morning, the court had hoped she would weep and then delegate solutions. Instead, Leora spent the hours until noon writing lists, the first listed regions and their grievances: Galdane, blight, malnutrition, unsank cisterns, fleas. The second listed names, plucked straight from the storm of shared torment: Dessa from Cliffport, salt rash worsening, Karu, bite from hound. The councillors protested that many of those names held no official record, yet when riders were dispatched, the strangers existed. Ailments exact to the Queen's testimony. A courier who delivered salve to Karu returned pale. "Majesty," he said, "how did you know the dog was black with one eye?" Leora only rubbed the bruise in her temple that was someone else's lost tooth. "Because I felt its bite." By the second week she reorganized the treasury. By the third she had codified a line of physicians free to travel the roads, each bound to file reports before dawn. She hired former thieves to map hidden alleys where stabbings grew frequent. She opened palace granaries. Never had the nobles seen a sovereign so possessed, riding policy like wildfire chasing a drought. Yet the Thorn crown had other lessons to teach. Compassion can be swift, remedy is slow. Pain in a human body may vanish when a cut scabs, but pain in thousands of bodies was a hydra. You lopped one head, 2 new afflictions budded. Leora discovered that the harder she laboured, the broader the experience of suffering became, not narrower. Her brow learned to predict weather by the arthritic twinge of elder knees, to detect tavern brawls by a flash of broken knuckle. She learned that hunger had shades. The gnaw of a day's missed meal felt different from the collapse of a child's sugar-starved blood. She learned there were anguishes so refined she lacked words. The dignified humiliation of an artist who sold his last painting, the yearning of a widow for the scent of a coat long burned for warmth. Every dawn she endured them all, and every dawn she swore it would not be in vain. 1 month into the reign, the Chancellor, Lord Perevan, petitioned for a private audience. Gold brocade armours clinked as he bowed. "Your Majesty," he began, "Imperial envoys arrive next turn of the moon to negotiate coal rights. They must see a queen radiant, not enfeebled by all this self-flagellation." "Feel the pain. Ease the pain," Leora recited. "There is no third path, Majesty. We do not contest your sympathy, but we worry for the realm. If you collapse, Rydea is unseated. Indulge tinctures, at least." "Tinctures cannot dull 1,000 cuts unless they dull 1,000 sovereigns," she said. "Replenish the infirmaries. That is the only lawful remedy." "Dismissed." Perevan departed, robes thrashing behind him, but the seed of dissent had already rooted in the corridors. Generals winced to see their rulers' shoulders knot like sailors' rope. Financiers fretted. The palace wages paid for civil medics left coffers thin for defences, and the nobles who lined their halls with imported wine whispered that a queen who felt peasant splinters might one day feel a hint of nobles' greed and judge accordingly. They needed proof that the crown was unsustainable. They decided to engineer it. At the foothills of Brickrest Ridge, 70 leagues from Iskarn, lay the village of Renfell. It was a speck on courier maps, but famed locally for its glass artisans who stoked their furnaces day and night. Months earlier, drought had lowered the creek, forcing artisans to draw water from wells. Kilns cracked under imperfect cooling. Shards littered the paths. Yet the guild persisted, loyal to orders from the capital's merchants. One night, under clouds fat with withheld rain, a company of masked riders burned the remaining cordwood and shattered the cistern. The riders did no murder, stole no coin, and wore insignia of no recognized banner. They left behind only smoke and an impossible demand. "Petition your queen for relief or perish." The villagers, choking on ash, knew the rumour, that Queen Leah awoke each dawn to shared wounds, so they waited for sunrise. That same dawn, the crown drove knives of heat through Leah's sinuses. Breath scalded her throat. Her palms blistered though she sat in cool stone halls. She tasted glass dust on her tongue and felt lungs clogged by smoke. By the time Chancellor Peregrine came to break fast with her, she was doubled over. "Renfell," Few croaked. "Fire lungs burning. Help them." Peregrine feigned concern, dispatched a token patrol with food and returned by afternoon bearing tragic reports that the patrol found no survivors. The glass folk had abandoned the village, leaving ruins unfit for habitation. "Unknown raiders roamed the area," he said. "To send more aid would be to jeopardize soldiers." Leora clenched her cup until bronze pain mingled with blood from her palm. "They are alive. The crown does not empathize with ash. There are survivors. Majesty, perhaps the diadem overreaches, conjuring illusions." She slammed the table. "I felt a child cut on glass, Peregrine. The wound is shallow yet fresh. I taste the grit." Her outburst might have parted clouds, but Peregrine had prepared a diversion. "The Imperial envoy docks tomorrow," he reminded. "If the Queen journeys cross-country chasing phantoms, the Empire perceives weakness." Leora hesitated. She had neither slept nor eaten well in weeks. Her generals clamoured for her presence at the forthcoming summit. She could not uncover treachery without proof, yet the agony of Renfell haunted her. So she compromised. Oris, now promoted to Marshal of Riders, would take 20 soldiers and supplies, enough to rebuild 3 cottages and ride through the night. At dusk, as the clatter of hooves faded, Peregrine convened with several nobles in candle-lit secrecy. "Phase 2, he said. The plan was simple. Delay Oris, proliferate rumours that rebels masqueraded as villagers, ensure Leora's relief caravan arrived too late. By then, the Queen, humiliated, would see the folly of chasing every twinge, but conspiracies seldom obey their architects. Cree Ellie Torvain had never met a queen, but she knew crowns. Apprenticed to the royal metalsmith, she spent her 14th year hammering bronze filigree, sanding burrs from brooches, and polishing ceremonial breastplates smooth as still water. The Thorn crown, however, was off-limits. Master Duren forbade anyone within 3 strides of its pedestal. Ellie admired it from afar, noticing how the inside curve shone faintly green where decades of sweat had patinated the bronze. Ellie's father was one of the glassworkers of Renfell, though the palace had lost track of that lineage generations ago. When flames swallowed the village, he herded his family toward the forest, lungs raw. Ellie, on courier errands to deliver repairs to merchant wagons, happened to be days away and thus escaped. She got news of the fire by overhearing soldiers in a tavern. One guard said, "The Queen's pet marshal rides hard for Renfell. Poor lass doesn't know she chases ghosts." Another retorted, "Ghosts? Wasn't the raid staged by our own?" They hushed when Ellie leaned closer. She rode home on a borrowed mule, heart pounding. The first thing she found near the ridge was her younger brother crouched over a woman with smoke-raw eyes. Her mother. The refugees were alive but desperate, hiding from rumours that more masked riders would return. Ellie promised relief was on its way. She would intercept Marshal Oris to lead her straight here. Night deepened. Far off, wolf howls threaded the trees. Ellie climbed the ridge path to keep lookout and, by luck or fate, glimpsed torches bobbing along the lowland road Oris's expedition. She sprinted, waving arms. A soldier's arrow would have pinned her throat had Oris not shouted to hold. Ellie blurted the conspiracy, the riders' masks, how villagers hid in the mossy hollows. Oris weighed the tale quickly. She recognized truth in soot-stung eyes. They followed Ellie's lead, descending into a ravine where the Renfell folk huddled. The relief tents erected, wounds salved, throats given water. But before Oris could organize escort back to the capital, horns brayed. A company larger than hers advanced, banners secret in the dark. Arrows hissed into canvas, panic erupted. The ensuing skirmish was short but brutal. Whoever the attackers were, they carried crossbows and curved sabres rather than standard army steel. Oris's disciplined riders formed a shield wall, buying time for civilians to scatter. Yet numbers favoured the masked force. Ellie grabbed a dropped sword, swung clumsily to deflect a bolt aimed at her brother. The blade jarred her wrist. Pain shot up, but she did not falter. When dawn's first amber stripes gathered on the horizon, Leora collapsed in her council chamber before she could even rise from bed. Pain hammered worse than any preceding morning. Fresh punctures in forearms, a gash above a soldier's eye, shards of glass in a woman's calf. But laid among them was fear like ice, the terror of people under assault, and one agony blazed singular, a young girl's wrist sprained, yet fueling courage far heavier than the joint could bear. Ellie. Leora did not know the name, but the sensation felt different, nearer, personal, as though destiny tugged. She struck the alarm bell. Servants startled. The Queen was supposed to receive the Imperial delegation in 2 hours. Instead, she commanded armor prepared and horses saddled. Chancellor Perivan arrived, eyes wide. "Majesty, you cannot depart. The realm bleeds. Send troops. Your presence is unnecessary, improper. My presence is the duty bound to this bronze." She touched the thorns which this dawn had bitten deeper. "Every hurt arrives, whether I ride or lounge. I choose to ride." She stormed to the yard where only a skeleton detachment remained, many of her best riders already with Oris. Nonetheless, Leora mounted. Some felt thrill, a queen marching in person. Others, dread, if she died, succession chaos. Perivan, cornered, reluctantly assigned his own household guard to escort her. But once the gates clanged shut, he sprinted to scribble an urgent letter. "Phase 3, he wrote, and sealed it with his signet. The hers the ride was punishing, the road slick from night dew, Leora's head throbbing with the doubled pain of a fractured rib not hers, yet each league closed a distance in mind as well as map. She felt Oris's determination like hot coal, sensed the massed army's malice like frost. She pushed her horse harder. By nightfall they reached the outskirts where smoke still rose. Leora dismounted and ordered torches muffled. They advanced under moonlight. Soon they found discarded crossbow bolts carved with a crest she recognized. Perivan's household tree, though filed to disguise. Rage boiled, but she clamped it. Evidence first, reckoning later. A sentinel spotted them and led them to a limestone overhang where Oris tended wounded. When the marshal glimpsed her queen entering, she tried to kneel, nearly collapsing. "Majesty." "No formality. Who attacks?" Oris recounted. "Ellie, arm in sling," added what she overheard of court conspiracy. While she spoke, Leora felt the girl's wrist ache echo in her own. She realized the proximity of sufferers amplified the crown's intimacy. Footsteps crunched. A captured rider was dragged forth. Mask removed, the face belonged to Perivan's second cousin. Under threat of steel, he confessed the plot. To exaggerate the crown's burden, break the Queen's will, and present Perivan as regent candidate before the Empire's envoy. Silence fell. Lyra's pulse hammered smarter than any crown thorn. She could ride back, arraign Perivan, but Imperial envoys would have arrived. Politics demanded one answer. The crown demanded another. Mend the hurt now. The wounded lay groaning. Children sobbed for lost homes. Oris had fewer than 30 fit soldiers. "Build no scaffold before we raise shelter," Leora said. "We save them first." The Queen worked through the night, packing wounds, carrying buckets, even melting silver spoons to pluck arrow lesions with searing sterility. Legend later said the bronze thorns glowed as if proud of her labor. At dawn, the diadem delivered its litany again, but for the first time, some of the previous day's pangs were gone. Fever retreated from the fisher child, the glass dust eased in lungs. Joyful reprieve twined with the agony. Like sun, threads through storm cloud. When they marched for the capital 2 days later, they were 300. Villagers, smiths, riders, wounded on carts, and the Queen in the vanguard. News galloped ahead of them, and Citadel Iskan Square brimmed with commoners cheering, nobles gawking. The imperial envoy, delayed by river fog, arrived the same hour as Lyra's procession. They saw not an enfeebled ruler, but a woman mud-stained, eyes fierce, crown gleaming like smouldering coal. Chancellor Perevan tried to greet the envoys in her stead. The envoy captain brushed past him to bow before the Queen. "Your Majesty," he said, noting blood crust on her gauntlet. "Rhaidia's strength is evident." Lyra nodded, then turned to her guards. "Arrest Lord Perevan and all co-conspirators. Their trial will be public. Let none say the crown of thorns shields the corrupt." Perevan sputtered, but the bronze circlet upon Leora's brow seemed to grow roots of judgment. None challenged the order. Weeks passed. Renfel's furnaces glowed again, this time with improved wells and stone flues funded by seized assets of traitors. Ellie returned to the capital as apprentice, not only to the metalsmith, but to the Royal Engineers. The Queen wished to turn village craft into realm-wide artistry. Oris oversaw a new corps called Dawn Riders, sworn to verify every sunrise pane with eyes on the ground. The Imperial Treaty was signed on terms favourable to Rhaidia, the envoy remarking wistfully that, had his own emperor worn such a crown, their histories might read kinder. But the lesson Lyra never forgot was this: the crown exacts pain, yet also conveys the map to cure it. The cost is relentless vigilance. The reward, a realm in which the ruler's flesh vibrates with the hum of its people, one body. One morning, months later, as snow gleamed on ramparts, Lyra felt a sharp sting on her thumb, not hers. Somewhere, a child learning to carve toy soldiers had slipped with a knife. The Queen winced, smiled, and dipped her quill in ink. She would dispatch a message to the village workshop. Proper knives for little hands, leather guards for sleeves, and a carpenter's grant so wounds might birth livelihoods rather than scars. The Bronzethorns pressed their silent covenant. She rose to face the dawn, neither servant nor master of pain, but its steward. Thus endured the tale of the Bronzethorn crown, no mere artifact of torment, but a promise that rulers shall never again hide from the echo of a subject's cry, and that in feeling the hurt of the realm each sunrise they might learn to forge mornings where suffering found itself. Day by day, without a place to land,